You are listening to Unleash Now, the enterprise tech podcast generated entirely by AI. In this episode, we unleash into open source CRM and the company 20, who's taking on the CRM giants.
Hey there, everybody. Today we're diving deep into a company called 20. They're trying to build an open source alternative to Salesforce. Yeah, so if you've ever used a CRM or you just like to keep up with what's new in the tech world, this is going to be right up your alley. We're looking at a TechCrunch article by Romain Dillet to get all the details. He got a sneak peek at 20 and their mission.
Yeah, it's interesting. This isn't the first time someone has tried to build an open source CRM, but 20's approach has really gotten people talking in the tech community.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, taking on a giant like Salesforce with an open source model, that's a bold move. The article even points out this trend of open source alternatives for like everything. Base Row's going after Airtable, Document Shono's aiming for DocuSign. Feels like everything's getting the open source treatment.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. It's like this shift towards community-driven development. Users aren't just sitting back anymore. They're getting involved in helping shape the software. And for businesses, this is a huge deal. Open source can mean big savings, more flexibility to customize things, and just a sense of ownership within the community.
Okay, so open source is definitely hot right now. But what makes 20 different from the others who have tried this before? Like Sugar CRM. The article mentions them too. They did okay, but they never got to Salesforce's level. And they even gave up on their open source version a while back. So what makes 20 think they can succeed where others haven't?
That's the big question, isn't it? The landscape is totally different now compared to when Sugar CRM was trying to make it. Platforms like GitHub have made it way easier for developers to work together and build communities. But 20's taking a different approach, too, in terms of their vision. They're not trying to just copy Salesforce feature for feature.
Interesting. So what are they doing differently?
They're building a platform that's bigger than the traditional CRM. They want a flexible data model that can adapt to any business. Think about it like this. You've got your standard stuff like contacts or companies, but you can also make your own custom objects to represent anything you want. The article gave some cool examples, like a restaurant chain. They could create a restaurant object to track all kinds of stuff, like performance, menus, customer feedback, all in one place.
Okay, I see where this could be a game changer, especially for businesses with very specific needs.
Exactly. And that's just one piece of it. They're also building a really powerful API using GraphQL and REST. Basically, that means other applications can easily connect to 20 and exchange information.
Now, I know we've got some listeners who aren't super technical. Could you break that down a little? What does that mean for them practically?
Sure. So imagine you're a small business owner using 20 to manage your customers. With a good API, you could link 20 to your email marketing or your accounting software, even your website. Suddenly your CRM becomes the central hub for all your customer data. And you can automate stuff and get insights you never could before.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense now. So they're going for more than just a CRM. They want to be a whole platform. That's a big goal.
It is, and it's similar to what Salesforce itself has been doing. But the key difference is that 20 is doing it with an open source approach. It's like they're saying, we're building the foundation, come help us build on it.
That's pretty bold. But can they really take on Salesforce? Salesforce has such a huge head start, tons of resources. They practically own the CRM market.
You're not wrong. It's a classic David versus Goliath situation. But remember, David won in the end. And in tech, we've seen smaller companies shake things up before. Think about Linux going up against Microsoft or Android challenging Apple.
Those were different, though. What makes you think 20 has a shot in this fight?
Well, for one, being open source gives them a unique advantage. They can tap into a global community of developers, potentially innovating way faster than a traditional company. But it's still early, and there are challenges. The article said they're still missing some key features, like automation and complex workflows. Building something this complex takes time. And even with their $5 million funding round, they have a long way to go.
You mentioned the funding. They've got some impressive backers, right?
Oh, yeah, they do. Mathilde Collin from Front, Dharmesh Shah from HubSpot, those are big names, and having them involved gives 20 a lot of credibility. Plus, they've got support from venture capital firms like Runa Capital and Y Combinator, and even Automatic, the company behind WordPress. It's a pretty solid lineup.
Okay, so we've got open source, a flexible data model, a powerful API, and a community focus. Sounds good in theory, but what can you actually do with 20 right now?
Well, the article said they've got the basics covered. Lists and Conven views, tasks, notes, sorting, filtering, All the usual stuff you'd expect in a CRM. Oh, and a Kanban view, just so everyone knows. It's a visual way to organize your work with cards you move around. Helps you see your projects and track progress at a glance.
Got it. So useful for managing projects. But what about those advanced features, like the automation and complex workflows? Are those available yet?
Not yet, those are still being developed. So for a big company that relies on a lot of automation, 20 probably isn't ready to replace Salesforce just yet. But for smaller teams, startups, or even just individuals, people who are looking for a flexible CRM and don't mind a little setup, 20 could be a really interesting option, especially if you want to integrate your CRM with other tools and platforms.
Yeah, that's one thing that really stood out to me about 20, that focus on APIs and integrations. It feels so much more modern than some of the older CRMs out there.
Absolutely. It goes back to that idea of 20 as a platform, not just software. They're building something that others can build on top of, which just opens up so many possibilities.
The article compared it to Salesforce's success. They said it was built on three key things: a flexible data model, their own programming language called Apex, and a framework for customizing the front end. It seems like 20 is trying to do the same thing, but with an open source approach.
Exactly. And if they can get developers building on their platform like that, it could be huge. Imagine anyone being able to create custom apps on top of a powerful open source CRM. It's pretty exciting.
It definitely seems like they're putting a lot of effort into attracting developers and building that community. But let's be realistic for a second. Even with all the hype and the funding, they're still a small company. Going up against Salesforce is like bringing a knife to a gunfight, isn't it?
It's a valid concern. Salesforce has a massive head start and a ton of resources. But disruption often comes from unexpected places. We've seen it happen over and over again in tech. Smaller, more agile companies can move faster and innovate in ways that bigger companies can't.
I guess it all comes down to execution then. They have a great vision, but can they actually deliver? And even if they build a fantastic product, can they get people to use it?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Adoption is everything. They need to build momentum, get users on board, and create a thriving ecosystem.
And that brings up another potential challenge: security. Open source software can be amazing, but it also introduces new security risks. How can businesses be sure their data is safe with an open source CRM?
That's a crucial point, and it's something 20 will need to address directly. They have to build trust with their users and show that they take security seriously. Transparency is going to be key. They need to be open about their code, their security practices, and how they'll handle vulnerabilities.
So we've talked about the potential, the excitement, and the challenges. But from your perspective, what are some of the downsides or risks of an open source CRM for businesses?
One potential downside is the lack of traditional support. With a closed source CRM like Salesforce, you can call someone when things go wrong. With open source, you're relying on the community for help, and that can be unpredictable.
That makes sense. And I imagine that could be a deal breaker for some businesses,
Yeah.
especially larger ones that need that dedicated support.
Definitely. Another risk is that development could slow down or even stop completely if the community loses interest or if key people move on. We've seen that happen with lots of open source projects. It's something to consider.
So for a business thinking about using 20, it sounds like there's a trade-off. On the one hand, there's the potential for lower costs, more flexibility, and a great community. But on the other hand, there's some uncertainty about support, long-term development, and security.
That's a good way to put it. It's important to weigh those pros and cons carefully and decide if an open source CRM is the right fit for your needs and your risk tolerance.
Okay, let's switch gears for a bit and talk about the bigger picture of this open source trend. You've been focusing on 20 and CRM, but this is happening all over the software world. What does it mean for the future of software development as a whole?
That's a really interesting question. I think we're seeing a fundamental shift in how software is created and used. The old model of closed source proprietary software is being challenged by this new open and collaborative approach. And I think that's a good thing overall. It could lead to more innovation, lower costs, and more choices for everyone.
But isn't there a risk that this open source movement could hurt traditional software companies?
There's definitely some tension there, and we're going to see some interesting battles in the next few years. But I don't think open source will completely replace closed source software. There's room for both. I think we're moving toward a hybrid model, where open source and closed source software work together
That makes sense. It's not about one being better than the other. It's about finding the right balance for each situation.
Exactly. And I think the key for software companies, whether they're open source or closed source, is finding ways to stand out and provide real value in a market that's getting more competitive all the time.
So for our listeners who aren't deep in the tech world every day, what's the main takeaway from all of this? What should they be paying attention to as these trends develop?
I think the main takeaway is that the software world is changing fast. Open source is becoming a major player, and it's important to understand both the opportunities and the challenges it brings. For businesses, it's crucial to stay informed about these trends and make smart decisions about the software they use. And for consumers, it's a really exciting time. There are more choices than ever before, and users are gaining more power.
It really does feel like things are changing. And not just the technology itself, but like the whole philosophy behind it, this idea of openness and collaboration, community-driven development. It's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's exciting to see companies like 20 really embracing that and trying to apply it to something as complex as CRM. Whether they succeed or not, they're definitely pushing the boundaries and making us rethink what's possible.
Yeah, and speaking of pushing boundaries, the article talked about 20's vision of going beyond just the usual CRM stuff. They want to use their platform to make it easier to reuse data and connect with other tools. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Sure. Basically, they're saying they don't want to be just a CRM. They want to be the foundation for a whole ecosystem of applications and services. And that's where their focus on APIs is really important.
Okay, for those who missed it earlier, can you remind us what an API is and why it matters so much here?
An API, or Application Programming Interface, it's basically a set of rules that let different software applications talk to each other and exchange data. It's like a universal translator for software. So in 20's case, their API lets developers build custom integrations that connect 20 to all sorts of other tools and platforms.
So like you could connect it to your marketing automation, your accounting software, your project management. It seems like the possibilities are endless.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so interesting. Imagine you're a healthcare provider, for example. You could use 20's data model to create a patient object and then use the API to connect 20 to your electronic health records, your appointment scheduling, even wearable health data. You could build a completely personalized and integrated system for managing patient care.
Wow, that's a really great example. I could see how this could change things for specific industries. It's not just about customer data anymore. It's about connecting all these different data sources and getting a complete view of your business, your patients, whatever you're managing.
Exactly. It's about empowering people to build the tools they need. Instead of being stuck with one vendor's system.
It's almost like a new operating system for business. But instead of running on your computer, it's in the cloud. And it connects all these different apps and services.
That's a great way to put it. It really highlights the potential of what 20 is doing. They're not just building a CRM, they're building a platform that could completely change how businesses work.
But let's be realistic. Building a platform like this is a huge undertaking. Even with the funding and the talent they have, are they trying to do too much?
It's definitely ambitious, and there's no guarantee they'll succeed. But I think their approach is smart. They're starting with a solid base, the core CRM features, and then they're expanding from there, building out the API and getting developers on board to build on top of it.
And it seems like they're really putting a lot of effort into building that developer community. The article mentioned they're active on GitHub and other platforms, talking to developers and encouraging them to contribute.
Right. Community building is crucial for any open source project, but it's especially important for 20. They need to create a strong community of developers, people who are excited about the platform and want to be a part of it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, the big question is still out there. Can 20 really do it? Can they take on Salesforce and build this open source CRM platform of the future?
It's hard to say for sure, but their approach is definitely interesting. They've got the open source aspect, a clear vision, and a strong focus on community.
It'll be really interesting to see how it all plays out. And regardless of whether they succeed or not, 20's journey raises some important questions about the future of software and the power of community-driven innovation.
Absolutely. It's definitely a story worth following.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into 20 and the future of CRM. It's a complex world that's changing all the time, but hopefully we've given you something to think about and helped you understand what's happening. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep learning.
Thank you for listening. If you like this episode, please share and follow us on social media. Find us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube to be the first to listen to our next episode.